All right. I will now call this meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. We will now call the roll. Senator Stevens.
Present.
Senator Bull.
Present.
Senator Mercedes. Senator Vashikidze. Senator Vo.
Here.
I am here. Senator Piscatelli.
Here.
Senator Underwood. Senator Morris.
Here.
Senator Addy. Okay, Senator Addy just disconnected there, but they're rejoining. Senator Vernon. Senator Troutman. Senator Krepok.
Here.
Senator Bass. Senator Robbins. Senator Freeland. And Senator Guilano. Okay. See, with 8 members present, we do have quorum by my count. So we will move into the public comment period. Is there anyone here for Senator Addy? Your hand is up.
Sorry, my internet cut out for a moment. Was I counted for attendance or?
I've marked you as present.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see. If there's no one here for public comment, we'll move into the consideration of business. Our first item of legislation is USR 104-241. This one was introduced by myself. And so the background to this resolution is twofold. Firstly, for those who haven't been in the student government suite, there's like a lot of old files floating around in the student government suite that were never properly archived. And in addition to that, we also have the Senate Google Drive folder, which a lot of those files also haven't been archived properly. And what's supposed to happen is the clerk and secretary are supposed to do this, but we haven't had a clerk in about 1.5 years, and the secretary has been much more focused on doing the work for executive branch. And so in order to get this work done, I've talked it over with some people, and what we're going to do is we're going to just form what we call a select committee to come together and like deal with digitizing all these documents and properly archiving them. This involves digitizing like several thousand pages of documents going back to at least 2012, if not further in the past. And these documents include things like meeting agendas, meeting minutes, legislation, old versions of the code, all kinds of things floating around that have never been properly filed. So that's what the purpose of this is. The committee's job, the committee will be made up of 6 people. Half will be appointed by the speaker, and the other half will be just elected by the Senate as a whole. And then the committee will just issue periodic updates to the Senate as it completes its work. So at this time, I'll yield to any questions on the legislation. And if there are no questions there, I will entertain motions.
Move to enter discussion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, hearing no objections, we are now in discussion. At this time, are there any points of discussion? And if there are no points of discussion, are there any motions? Seeing no points of discussion, are there any motions?
I move to recommend this resolution favorably by unanimous consent.
Second.
Seconded.
Okay, hearing no objections, USR 104-241 is going recommended favorably by unanimous consent. This will bring us to our next agenda item, USR 242, a resolution to standardize language in the standing rules and for other purposes. Let's see, Senator Christ, I believe you are here.
Yes, this resolution is pretty straightforward. It's just making the language in the standing rules internally consistent and more clear. I think that's obviously a good thing.
Let's see, are there any questions for Senator Christ about this legislation? If there are no questions, do I hear motions?
Motion to suspend all necessary rules and consider favorably.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Would the speaker be amenable, or would you be amenable to making it by unanimous consent so we don't have to do a roll call vote?
Yeah, I think I specified unanimous, but yes.
All right, hearing no objections, this resolution will pass favorably by unanimous consent. We'll move to our next agenda item, USB 104-243. Again, introduced by Senator Christ, and it's a bill to standardize language in the undergraduate code and for other purposes. Senator Christ, do you want to introduce this for us?
Sure, it's essentially the same purpose as the previous resolution, just making the language internally consistent and clarifying everything.
See, are there any questions for Senator Christ? And if not, do I hear any motions?
I move to enter discussion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we are now in discussion. Are there any points of discussion? If there are no points of discussions, do I hear any questions? Or do I hear any motions? Sorry.
I move to recommend this favorably by unanimous consent.
Seconded.
Okay, hearing no objections, USB 104-243 will be reported favorably by unanimous consent. Thank you, Senator Christ, for taking the time to be here with us. All right, and this brings us to our last item of legislation on the calendar, USB 104-244, a bill to improve the administration of legislating by prescribing fair administrative procedure and for other purposes. This one is introduced by myself. And this bill is a product of discussions between myself and some graduate students. And it regards the way the Joint Governance Council work. For those who aren't familiar, the JGC is the body which exists to coordinate between the undergraduate and graduate governments and to pass legislation affecting joint matters. However, when this body was created, they neglected to actually explain how the JGC works or how joint legislation is to be passed. And so for some years, this process has kind of just operated based on norms and vibes, basically, which is just broadly not good and has led to several issues over the past few years. So I worked with the graduate president pro tempore, Joshua Bakita, to write up this legislation to kind of explain how JGC works. And what it does is it allows the JGC to approve standing rules to actually like confirm its chair. Which like it's supposed to have a chair, but there's no process for actually confirming them. And it also just like fully explains how joint legislation works. A lot of this is language taken directly from the Constitution, but with some like additional clauses that explain how things work. The most important addition being that the JGC will be able to like refer legislation to a constituency senate. Because as it currently stands, if like the undergrads pass a bill, but the graduates want to consider it within their own senate, the only way for that to happen is if the graduate students introduce an exact copy of the bill in their senate. Like there is no way for the JGC to send legislation to the graduate senate, and this bill will change that. It will also like state what happens to legislation that is failed by the Joint Governance Council, and that will basically be the legislation is reported as failed to like the appropriate senate by the presiding officer of that senate. So that's what this bill does. It's like a fairly technical bill that most people will never interact with, which is like broadly fine, but it fixes like a very glaring problem in the way that our government works. And will hopefully make it so that future generations don't have to like encounter the same problems that we've been dealing with. So at this time, I'll yield to any questions if there are any. And if there are no questions, I will entertain motions. Senator Stevens.
Thank you. Is this joint legislation?
Yes, it is. Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, I'll entertain motions.
I move to suspend unnecessary rules in order to recommend this without prejudice by unanimous consent.
Second.
Second.
Okay, hearing no objections, USB 104-244 will be reported without prejudice by unanimous consent. This does conclude all of the items that were on our calendar for today. I do have a couple of announcements for those who are not aware. Tomorrow at, let's see, what time is this again? I believe at 6 p.m. there is going to be a speaking event where Pat McClory has been invited by the Senate and the executive branch to like speak about like politics in North Carolina. He will be talking in Dye Hall, which if you don't know where that is the top floor of New West. you are all like very much invited to attend this. There is I believe Christian emailed to everyone a sign up form that he asked for all of us to fill out if you are going to attend.
Yeah.
I'm going to be there. I'd recommend everyone try and go if you have the availability to hear from a former North Carolina governor, whether you agree with him or not on his policies. So just wanted to say that before we adjourned. I have no further announcements.
Let me just
and
share this.
If there's nothing else anyone else wants to talk about, the committee stands adjourned at 7:14 p.m. Thank you all for being here.
So for tonight,